Harry, are you okay if we record the session? Yeah.
Hello. Let me just check my sound.
Hi,
Hello.
Caron. Thank you. I'm glad we found you.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I was beginning to sweat thinking I'm not going to get there.
That's okay. We were just going to change the order if we couldn't get you in straight away, but it's all fine. Thank you.
We'll leave it as is now. So, Kathy, is everybody in yet or not?
There's 18 in so far, Marianne.
Okay.
So we'll just give it another minute and let Caron catch her breath, and then we can start.
Caron, did you want to test your slides are okay to share, or you'll be okay?
Of course, yeah. Oh, thanks for your patience, folks.
Thanks, everyone. We're just getting started in 1 minute. Okay. And the full screen.
Can you see that?
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Stop sharing now, Kath, and we'll get started, I think.
Okay, let me just come out of that.
Stop sharing. There you are.
Here we are.
How's
That's
our
it.
numbers going, Kathy? Oh, they're still going up. Give people just one more 2 minutes, do you think? Or... Okay, I think I'll get started. So we're running on time. Hello and welcome. My name is Marianne Theobald and I'm an Associate Professor and Researcher in Education at QUT here in Brisbane, Australia. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Centre for Child and Family Studies Research Forum titled Showcasing Child Voice, Research with and by Children. I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Turrbal and Yuggera people. I acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. I recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning, and acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within our community here at QUT. I would also like to acknowledge the First Nations people on the lands wherever you are at the moment. Our forum today is supported by the Centre for Child and Family Studies. This centre, led by Associate Professor Kate Williams, is a transdisciplinary group of researchers who collaborate closely with industry partners and across these priority areas. It's wonderful to see such interest in our topic today. We have 140 people who have said they're going to join today, so we hope that we get most people online today. And to begin, I'd just like to take you back to 1978. And at that time, this cartoon was published in the New Yorker. It depicts an adult asking a small child to report on their experiences of school. The adult says, "Now, tell me, William, if you can, how do you feel about first grade?" And at the time, so a scenario might have been considered humorous, as children's perspectives were not something normally attended to. But within the last 4 decades, we're pleased to say that there's been quite a shift, as many of us know and have embraced, from a focus on children as objects in research to children as co-designers of research. And this forum highlights the ways in which children demonstrate competence as researchers and active research participants, and explores some of the associated challenges and opportunities. We have 3 speakers tonight, and we're delighted to have them, who are each at different stages of their careers, but who share the same passion, and that is of implementing high quality research with and by children. Our first speaker is Dr. Caron Carter, who is Senior Lecturer in Early Childhood at Sheffield Hallam University. And as Caron speaks and the speakers go on today, you have an opportunity to put some questions in the question and answer at the end. Our speakers will speak for 20 minutes, and after our third speaker, we have some time for questions and answers. So our first speaker, Dr. Caron Carter, is currently researching how schools support children's friendships and well-being during new times. Much of Caron's work has involved looking at ways to develop a listening culture through creative methods, providing opportunities for children's views to be heard and for ways for children to exercise their agency. So I'd love to welcome Caron very warmly, who's coming from the UK early in the morning over there. And I'll ask her to share her slides now. Thank you, Caron.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'll just get these slides up. Now, when I get these slides up, I probably can't see anybody's faces. So if you can't see anything, then give me a shout. How does that look?
Perfect. Thanks, Caron.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real privilege to be here today and to be, talking about this great work. So I really want to say thank you very much for this opportunity. And yeah, it's very the people that are here, I want to just say thank you to them as well, really, those people who are present, because it's either very early in the morning or it's kind of late in the evening for you. So yeah, show some dedication. So thank you very much. So yeah, I want to talk to you today about creative participatory methods and some of the opportunities and challenges that come with that. So let me just see if I can move this on. Here we go. So this work comes from a project that I've done with 2 colleagues. So my co-I was Ruth Barley, who can't be here today, she's on maternity leave, and research assistant Omar, who's a PhD student. So I want to kind of, acknowledge the work that they've done towards this project. And this work is, we've got 1 paper related to this under review, and then we've got another paper that we've almost finished that we're hoping in the next couple of months we will submit, which is focused particularly on this methodology and the sort of opportunities and challenges that arise from this particular methodology. So just to give you a bit of a context before I talk to you about some of the sort of issues and the challenges. So this project came about during COVID, and we felt really passionately about about children and what was children. We went into lockdown, and in some circumstances and some contexts we felt children were marginalized and their voices silenced, which is what Lomax et al. Said in 2021. So and even before COVID happened, we were all really interested in listening to the voices of children. And we thought now we're in this situation with COVID, we really still want to be able to hear the voices of these children. So this project was looking at specifically, you know, some children were sort of isolated, and we wanted to look particularly at how were children maintaining their friendships during the pandemic. Were they able to maintain their friendships during the pandemic? What were they doing? So that's that's where our kind of thoughts started. And, you know, in terms of the research design, of course, we were drawing on our work from before COVID. So, you know, we wanted to look at research, you know, our research was always looking at research should be with children rather than on children, as Bell says in 2008. And we wanted to have the appropriate methodologies that we'd used previously. We'd used lots of visual methods. So this was something we considered with this project, that we still wanted to use some of those methods that we'd use and that approach that we use, but we also had to bear in mind that some pragmatic decisions had to be made because of the restrictions, and, you know, because we couldn't be in schools, so things had to be changed. So this was a pilot study which heard the voices of 10 children in England, so it's quite a small study regarding their friendships during this period. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the sort of methods and things that we used in a moment. And we were also mindful that we didn't want to be tokenistic, as Arnott and Wall talk about. You know, there's a lot of, you know, terminology has previously been about giving voice, but often there can be some connotations related to that in terms of, you know, being quite tokenistic, and that you know, the power lies with the adults who can give voice to children when it's appropriate, or when they want to give that power across. So we didn't want, you know, we felt that we should be looking at that and thinking it's not about giving voice, but it's about hearing those voices, and perhaps thinking about the terminology that we used to, you know, kind of probably disrupt the traditional power dynamics that's perhaps involved in that scenario. So again, part of our design looked at the pragmatic issues and also some of the terminology we were using. So today, of course, we said that was our project aim, was to have a look at, you know, what was happening with children, how they were keeping contact. And this presentation is all going to be around the methods and the challenges and so on that go with that. So just to give you a little bit, I always want to include a little bit of the literature. And again, we've always looked in our own work at ways to have creative methods to try and reduce those power differentials and to make children feel confident and comfortable to participate in research. So that was in the back of our minds when we started thinking about this project. And we really wanted children to have choice over the methods that they used. And I'll talk a little bit more about those choices and how we did those in a moment. Another big thing in research, when we're kind of face-to-face research, is that opportunity and time to build rapport with children. So ordinarily, we would go into schools, we would spend some time meeting the children, we'd spend some time around informed consent, assent, you know, making sure that, you know, children felt comfortable and they wanted to participate. And again, that was something that we had to rethink, really. And then during COVID, so there was the challenge of the rapport, but also there was a challenge over connectivity and being, you know, equitable, and thinking about the fact that some children might not have access to IT and that kind of thing. So there was lots of things that we were thinking about when we were kind of putting this together. So let's move on now to the methods. The methods, when we started to think about the methods, we thought, well, you know, we want to make sure that children can participate. So what we wanted to do was ask children before the interviews to create some kind of artifact to express their ideas about friendships, or to talk to us, a way that they could use to express how they kept contact with their friends. And This was then going to be followed up with an open-ended, unstructured interview, so the children could share their artifacts with us. And this would provide commentary to go with the artifacts and help that meaning-making process. So we did have some prompts for those interviews, but we really wanted also to allow children to take those interviews in any directions that they wanted. So we did leave them very open. And we wanted to offer that range because we wanted those different modes of participation, and we wanted to sort of align them to children's different interests and preferences and needs. So what we decided to do was provide them with 4 options for methods. So we kind of outlined 4 options. And then we also had a method of choice. So I'll talk a little bit about that method of choice in a moment. So the first thing we did was we thought, you know, we're in this situation. Some children might not have access to particular materials, drawing materials, art materials, or whatever it is. But we did think most families would potentially there would be a mobile phone in the home. So we thought actually photographs is a good one to use, thinking about, you know, being inclusive and allowing children lots of opportunities. And also taking a photo is often not as time consuming as perhaps some of the other methods. And we were mindful that, you know, it's a period of time where there'd been a lot of homeschooling, you know, and families might not want, they might see this as another little bit of homework. So again, we were trying to think about ways to make it easy for people to participate, really. And, you know, I think photography, as Tisdall says here, is a really nice way of kind of getting to that meaning, which often we might otherwise overlook as adults. And this is just one image, which is really great, I think. And this is two brothers who are visiting a friend who lives geographically close to them. And it was when I think we couldn't actually, you know, be inside with, so, you know, there were restricted numbers. So they went to see this friend so that he could have a chat with him through the window. And when they got there, he was gaming, he was playing on a game on his PS4 or PS5 or something. So they were actually looking through the window and watching him gaming. And they were, you know, telling us about this scenario of the gaming, which I thought was really, really great. So photographs is one scenario. The other scenario was drawings. And again, we were just mindful that this sort of age range of children, so the age range of children we were looking at was 7 to 11. And we knew that lots of children still in this age phase like drawing. So we thought that would be a really nice thing to include. But we were also mindful that not all children enjoy drawing. So again, this was the, you know, sort of rationale for having it as one of the methods, but there would be other methods if needed. Then we had 2 other methods that we included, but that were less successful. And again, I'll talk a little bit about why I think they were less successful. So we included poems. And again, we knew that this was something children were familiar with. They have it in school, it's part of the national curriculum. We thought this might be something that they'd like to do. And interesting, none of the 10 children picked poems. So I'll mention that in a moment. And then we also picked mapping. So we thought they could do a map or they could do a friendship map. And Ruth has done quite a lot of work on friendship mapping in her work. So we thought they might want to do some sort of mapping, a bit like a family tree, I suppose, to show their friends and where their friends are in different contexts. But no children chose this. And again, I'll come back to that one in a moment. The other thing we did say was the children could have a method of choice. And I suppose for that, we kind of thought, you know, we want to provide an opportunity in case a child wants to do something that we haven't thought of, and again, to align with interests and so on. 2 of the children opted for collage-based work, so a bit like this. And I think what's really nice about this, and I think I'll probably include this again when I work with children, is unlike drawing or painting, the collage doesn't require kind of perhaps a particular skill set or technique like you might have with, you know, painting or something like that. So it's quite, and I think obviously it's quite therapeutic to be doing the cutting and so on. So a couple of children chose the collage option. This is a lovely scenario that we found. This child chose collage, but also chose drawing and chose, you know, to put photographs on here. So there's photographs that are around the edge. So some photographs were of friends. They were of her in a bedroom doing some YouTube makeup. Wanted to take. So the collage, the drawing and the photos. Which again, I think that shows a really nice example of a child having agency and wanting, you know, to create something of their own, something a bit different. Also, I think having these different options, I know when we spoke to her about this, she was saying, well, sometimes I couldn't find what I was wanting with the collage, so I decided to draw it. So again, that kind of mix and match of methods, I think, is really, really nice, and probably we would advocate that in the future. I think with this sort of different options and the ones that the children didn't choose, I don't necessarily feel wasn't because they weren't successful. It might be because this is just a small scale study and those children, you know, particularly didn't align with them. But also, I think the thing that we didn't particularly do, a bit like with the friendship mapping or the poems, we didn't particularly give them any examples or inspiration. And I've noticed with some online research, I've seen examples where they've either given some examples, or there's a website where they've said, here are some examples of what children have contributed before or as part of this project already. So it gives the children some inspiration and some ideas of what that might look like. Again, I suppose there's advantages and disadvantages to that, but I think again that might enhance participation. So just to kind of talk to you a little bit, I'm just mindful I've probably only got about 5 minutes left, about the sort of methodological choices and some of those challenges I think are really important for us to talk about. So I'll just show you this little slide here. So with these methodological issues here, I think, you know, we found some opportunities. So obviously doing this online was really great in terms of, you know, inconvenience, travel costs. You know, if we kind of either went to the children or the children came to us, you know, it was a lot more convenient to be doing it in this way. And also the safety of the children and the researcher, because we had a parent present in the background. And that was kind of, you know, it's for safeguarding reasons, you know, us talking to children online and so on. So there was that kind of inbuilt sort of safeguarding there. I've mentioned the issues around developing rapport and the difficulties of that. We did struggle a little bit with this idea of digital inequality, and we were mindful there might have been some children that would have wanted to participate but couldn't because of the way, you know, this was set up. And we actually didn't recruit children through schools. We used Twitter and via their parents, gatekeepers, to get participation. So kind of very different to what we would usually do, where we would be face-to-face, you know, in schools. The other thing that we found 2 options with parental presence. So for some scenarios, we had this kind of what I would call an enabling parent who you know, really kind of helped the situation. And in that way, I mean that they were sat in the back of the room, the child started the interview, and then every so often the child would turn and ask a question, or they might have forgotten something, or perhaps they couldn't think of something. And the parent might just say one word or a couple of words. There was one boy saying something about I think I'd asked him something about what he'd been doing whilst he was during the lockdown and what they'd been doing at home. And the parents said, what about feeding the birds? And then the child then just went on for about a paragraph of talking about what they'd done in the garden and how they'd connected with nature and put food out for hedgehogs and all sorts of different things. So it felt a little bit like the presence of the adult was enabling. They were trying to sort of give them little prompts, help them feel confident and help perhaps with that rapport again, because they didn't know us so well. We did start each interview by just having an informal conversation with the children and, before we actually started doing the interview again, to try and help with that. The other scenario we had, and this is what Manning calls, the intrusive, I think they call it the intrusive other. So Manny 2016 talks about the intrusive other. And we had a little bit of that where sometimes the parent kind of jumped in and then spoke for the child. So we might have had some responses. I think we just had one scenario of this, or one or two scenarios of this, but one in particular I remember, where the child said something and then the parent jumped in and then kind of spoke for quite a while. So that was that was something that we've learned from, really. And I think if we were kind of doing this again, we'd perhaps create more guidance for parents over the interview process to try and help with that, really. And again, I think these parents are just trying to be really supportive and helpful, but then sometimes, whether you realize it or not, sometimes you can kind of inhibit your child and their views and so on. So that was something that we had to consider. So quite a few kind of challenges for us as we go along. Okay, so I think I've got about a minute left now. So just to kind of sum up, so for us, we felt there were quite a few ethical issues with being online. It wasn't the best circumstances, but we still wanted to allow children to be hearing children during this period of time. And we felt it was really important to still hear children during this time. So we had to sort of design something that was going to be as ethical as possible. And we tried with the research tools to kind of minimize the sort of power differential and try and find options that would appeal to children, regardless of their interests and so on. If we were to do it again, we did have Zoom guidance for parents, but we'd probably have a little bit more guidance on just the kind of process of the unstructured interview. And then we'd also probably have something that gave some examples of the different methods to kind of help participation or help children see the different options. And I think, this is something that is really important to think about now going forward in these new times, in this new normal. I mean, hopefully we won't be in a situation where we're online again. We could be, but it's something to consider. But I think some of the issues that came up perhaps might still be issues that we could use in face-to-face contact or considering face-to-face situations. And then I've just put one slide there to say other sorts of methods that I've used before, not particularly in this project, are the use of persona dolls and small world play interviews. Those have been face-to-face, but that's something for another time. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Caron. That was so interesting, the different methods and the challenges going along with that, with the online study that you conducted. So thank you so much for your insights. And I know there's a couple of questions popped up already. Oh, that's my alarm. And the next speaker I'm going to introduce is our PhD candidate here at QUT, Cynthia Hicbain. I'm just showing this. So Cynthia is a children's author, sessional academic and PhD candidate in early childhood education at QUT. Her area of research is children's lived experience of participation rights in early years education settings. Cynthia's current projects include facilitating young children's voices on General Comment 26 for submission to the UN and mentoring early childhood teachers in pedagogical practice. So thank you so much, Cynthia. We're looking forward to hearing your talk now.
Thank you, Marianne. Can you hear me? Okay, and can you see my screen? Hopefully. Oh, there's that bar again. Sorry, I don't really know how to get rid of this bar, so we're just going to have to live with it.
Try what you did before. Oh, it's down the, yeah.
Down the bottom.
Did you do the remove floating bar before?
Okay, let's give it a go. Sorry, everybody. I have this terrible, annoying sort of
I
floating
think
screen
some people
thing.
have had trouble getting on Zoom today too. So apologies if you missed the first couple of minutes of the presentation today.
No,
It's looking
it's not
a bit
wanting to
better.
do
It's
it.
a bit better than it was.
Than before? All right, we'll just have to kind of live with it. Sorry if it kind of ruins the presentation a little bit, but I'll do my best. Welcome and Wanya to this presentation on showcasing children's voices in research. I'd also like to thank everybody for coming. It's a real honour to be speaking on this topic and to be speaking in such amazing company. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Gubbi Gubbi people on whose land I'm coming from this afternoon. This is an overview of what I'll be sharing today. Firstly, I'll take you through my study, which is what this presentation is based on. I use 2 key ways to listen to children's voices, and I'll explain what these are and how they worked. Then I'll finish off by sharing what I learned. At the heart of my study is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is made up of 54 articles that articulate children's rights under the broad terms of protection, provision and participation. For Australia, the UNCRC underpins several national frameworks and provisions for children, but our long tradition and narrative of protecting children has meant that enacting children's rights and engaging them in a participatory framework can be challenging. My study therefore asked 2 key questions. How do early childhood educators navigate the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child? And what are children's lived experiences of participation rights in early childhood education? While I did engage in conversations with educators in stage 1 of the study, the bulk of my study used video ethnography. Video ethnography was split into 2 components: video recording and video stimulated accounts. The analytical tools I chose were ethnomethodology and conversation analysis. Ethnomethodology looks at how social worlds are built, and conversation analysis, or CA, is the systematic and empirical study of everyday interactions. So it's based on the belief that our knowledge is informed by our experiences. Applied CA investigates institutional talk and believes that institutions share unique characteristics. So what did this mean for my study? If children's social experiences are moulded through their talk and interaction, then studying children's talk and interaction with educators and peers would hopefully provide insights into how participation rights are talked into being. But I needed a further analytical step. I needed a way of identifying that children's participation rights were being enacted. The Lundy model conceptualizes Article 12, which is also known as the participation article, into 4 key elements that Lundy calls space, voice, audience, and influence. And what I liked about Lundy's model was that the elements could be easily mapped onto the analysed interactions. The challenge for me as a researcher was how to conduct a study which investigated children's participation rights, but also facilitate children's right to conduct research for themselves. So I attempted to do this in 2 ways. The first way was to conduct video stimulated accounts where children could review videos of themselves playing and discuss their perspectives on participation through guided questioning. they were also offered the opportunity to draw and express themselves through drawing. These accounts were filmed, and ethnomethodology and conversation analysis was applied to the data. The second way was to work with the educators to follow up on children's thinking, which had evolved out of the video-stimulated accounts, and support children's research interests. Video-stimulated accounts are produced when participants view video stimulus, in this case, children watching videos of themselves playing, and then share an account of the interactions by providing an insider's perspective. So this particular photograph shows how the video stimulated account was set up to begin with. But then after some consideration in terms of, how children could opt in and out more easily, this is what the video stimulated account with children looked like in practice. So I'll try and move this bar actually up here. This might help. Okay, so these are some still shots from a video stimulus shown to the participants. And the stimulus was children playing at the water table with an educator called Star. The start of the video stimulus is in figure 1, and in figure 5 you can see an older child, Riley, raising the water hose to spray a younger child, Kate. But when we played the video stimulus several times in slow motion, we noticed that preceding this event, a different younger child, Nate, had reached for the running water in figure 1, and Riley had responded by lifting the hose to spray Nate's hand. Riley and Nate shared a smile in figure 2 before Nate reached for the water again in figure 3. So when Kate later reached for leaves in the water in figure 4, Riley's action of spraying Kate in figure 5 takes on a whole new interpretation with the additional contextual information. The timestamps indicate this episode only lasts 12 seconds, which, by the way, was as long as the first aeroplane flight in 1903, and interestingly with very similar results, because I'd say Riley's attempt to anticipate what Kate wanted pretty much crashed and burned. Video-stimulated accounts therefore provide insights into moments that would otherwise be missed. And Star's intervention in figure 6 misses out on this vital information. So video-stimulated accounts provided an important platform for children to share a perspective that would otherwise have remained unheard. The second way was, as I said, to work with the educators of the centre to support children's research interests, which had evolved out of the video-stimulated accounts. What I noticed was that the children were extremely interested in the equipment and the technology that I was using. And the educators noticed this too, and we discussed what we could do to support this curiosity. The centre's pedagogical approach drew on a range of research that included Reggio Emilia and project work, and that's what they used to extend this significant noticing. So after much thought and reflection, it was decided that the provocations for thinking would come under the broad heading of tools. And this meant that old laptops were introduced into imaginary play and then later used for tinkering. Children were also offered tools like screwdrivers and saws and hammers and nails. And the children researched these tools through exploratory play, testing their ideas on how tools worked and what they could be used for. During this process, one child asked permission to use my iPad to take videos and photos of the other children using the tools. So then the video camera was offered to children as a focus for drawing and discussion. The educators used the model, what do you know and what do you want to know, as the basis for their discussions and to develop the children's capacity for theory building. So you can see here children of all ages being offered the opportunity to use the tools, which included hand saws, screwdrivers, hammers and scissors. The youngest was 18 months old and the oldest was 5. And while a few children liked to perform for the camera, they mostly remained deeply committed and curious about participating behind the camera. So to make this possible, the children were given access to an iPad and taught how to take videos using an app called Seesaw. This meant that each child could have their own folder under their own icon, which made them independent videographers. And this part of the process was prefaced by some rule setting, but I was mindful that the children who were invested in the research should be the ones creating the rules. My only suggestion was that the rules should be about keeping the camera and camera users safe, and that the rules made it fair for everyone to have a go. So Alexi and Richie were the rule makers. Both children were approximately 5 years old, and Alexi took it on himself to explain the rules to each user. And while the children waited their turn, educators invited them to draw a plan of what they would film. I also explained the concept of consent and pointed out who the non-participants were, which Alexi also passed on to the child videographers, sometimes helping to physically steer the iPad away. So rule number 1 was don't climb to get the camera, ask an adult to get the camera. Rule number 2, you can have the camera for that much, and when I asked him what that meant, it was 4 seconds. Rule number 3, you can use eeny, meeny, miny, moe to take turns, and if it lands on the same person, Alexi will choose who has the turn, and he won't pick the same person. Rule number 4 was to use the video camera safely, you have to tell the kids what each button does. Rule number 5, only big people can carry the tripod in case it falls on your toes. Rule number 6 was don't put the camera up high in case you can't get the camera back down. Rule number 7, you can't climb up a tree with the camera. And rule number 8, you need to not snatch it off people. The last rule was the rules can change if the rules don't work. When I had time to reflect on the experience, I realized that what the children were doing was really a reflection of what we were going through on a larger scale with COVID-19. The children had to resolve issues around individual rights versus collective rights. They had to work out who made the rules. They had to create definitions around safety and then take responsibility for the concepts of safety and protection by enforcing the rules that they'd made. And in deciding what was fair, they then had to deal with the repercussions when fair came under question. So the intention for this forum was to raise awareness and to advocate for how children's voices might be included and actioned in research. And I'd like to do this by sharing what I took away from this experience. And when I hear the term children's voices, I think about the ways children's voices are expressed, as well as the way we as researchers can listen. And one of the questions that flows from this is, when do we start? When should we start listening to children's voices? And for me, it was right at the project's inception. To have it as part of my research design and commit to the idea that for some of my research, the children would control the direction of where it could go. I was also very mindful of the asymmetrical power relationships that exist between adults and children, and how nothing makes this more obvious than our differences in height. If we had to do what the average 3-year-old has to do, we'd be talking with people almost 3 meters tall, or basically the tallest man alive. So I was deliberate in my choice of filming at the children's level and being available to answer questions about what I was doing. And by tuning into what the questions were about, it meant that the educators were able to work with the children and nurture their curiosity and sense of wonder. The final lesson for me was, why should I listen? And apart from the fact that children have the right to participate in the research process in ways that are meaningful for them, I think there's a lot to be gained from the process on both a professional and a personal level. What started out as a 4-month investigation into tools became something so much more profound about children's living and evolving definitions of participation. And researching hand in hand with children provided me with an opportunity to really understand what the word possibility meant and underline children's capacities to undertake research, if only we are brave enough to let them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was really interesting, and hearing about your study and working with children on their own projects as well. So a lot to take in. And now I'm going to, it's my pleasure to introduce our last speaker, and my delight as well, to introduce Dr. Harry Shier. Harry is Associate at the Centre for Education in Health and Environment in Nicaragua, and a researcher in the Covision project at the University College Dublin. And Harry is known to many of us from his readings and writings and publications and presentations, his rich contribution to child participation across many years, and his passion for participation rights for children. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Harry, and thank you so much, Harry, for joining us today from Dublin.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me share my screen and get started. That's the one I want. Just go to full screen mode. Right, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that properly? Yep, good. Okay, so I'm going to look at the aspect of supporting children as researchers when the children are doing the research and the adult is facilitating and supporting them in that process. And rather than focus on one project, I'm actually going to take you on a tour through my life story in chapters to look at a number of projects and how things have developed. So basically 4 chapters. I'm going to start with where this all began for me, which was in the United Kingdom. I am Irish, born and bred in Ireland, but I moved to the United Kingdom as a young man and lived there for many years. So it started for me in the United Kingdom. But then I moved to Nicaragua and took ideas that had started in the UK to the Nicaraguan context, and then becoming embedded in Nicaragua, developing the transformative research approach, and finally my doctoral studies, which led to an analytical tool. So we're going to see if we can get through all of that in 20 minutes. I do believe that we can. So the first chapter, UK 1993 to 2000, the Article 31 Children's Consultancy Scheme. And in fact, this all actually started in Australia, because I started my career back in the 1970s working on adventure playgrounds in the United Kingdom. But then I had the opportunity to go to the World Play Summit in Melbourne in 1993, and that's where I discovered children's rights. And this changed the course of my life, because that day in Melbourne, I realized that whatever issue you're concerned about, children's rights provides an underpinning framework, but it also provides an overarching approach to the work which I've been committed to ever since. So I came back to the United Kingdom, determined that everybody was going to know about Article 31 and that children have a right to play. And so the first thing I did was formed a committee, and we organized the first ever Article 31 conference. This was in Birmingham, England in June 1994. And then that led to the publication of the Article 31 Action Pack in 1995, which is still available. If it's a historical document now, but it has a unique, otherwise unavailable paper by Roger Hart in it. So it's definitely still worth looking up. And then from then we launched the Article 31 Action Network. And then in 1997, as a practical demonstration of what we believed in, we created the Article 31 Children's Consultancy Scheme. because at that time there was a fashion for making programs and institutions child-friendly. And this was very strong in the arts, culture, and recreation sectors. And people were looking for expert advice, and they were approaching people like me, but we were saying, children are experts on what is child-friendly and what isn't, what works for children and what doesn't, what's fun and what's boring, what makes them feel included and what makes them feel excluded. So we developed a methodology which we called children's consultancy, where children would become the expert advisors to people who wanted to make things child-friendly. Just a few examples of some of the projects that child consultants worked on in the late 90s. Here you can see a team of child consultants advising the management at the building the new Manchester City Art Gallery on how to create a child-friendly gallery. Here we can see child consultants commissioned by the British Waterways Board to research the educational and recreational potential of the English Canal network. And here, child consultants advising the management at the Tower of London, the famous historical monument in the centre of London, which you've probably seen pictures of or even visited, how to make it less boring. And after several years of that work, my own thinking, my own reflection on that work led to this new analysis, the Pathways to Participation model. Now, I could give you a whole lecture on this. It is very well known around the world these days. But I think we'll leave that for another time. I suggest if you're not aware of it, maybe go and look it up. But yeah, it talks about that there are 5 levels of participation, from the starting point where children are listened to, up to the top level here where children share power and responsibility for decision making. But that in itself was nothing new. What was particularly different, and I think made it so, gave it such impact, was the idea that a lot depends on the commitment of the adults who are engaging with and supporting these processes. An opening occurs when you're ready and willing to work with children at a certain level, but the opportunity is there when you're able, when the conditions are in place to make that possible. And most importantly, the obligation occurs when it's policy that this is the way we work. So like I say, we could talk about this for a whole lecture, but I think we'll move on to chapter 2. So basically, when the millennium came, I realized that I hadn't found my true home in the United Kingdom, and rather than return to Ireland, I moved to Nicaragua in Central America. And I arrived there just 3 weeks after the Pathways model was published in the United Kingdom. The big children's rights issue there, where I was living, was child labor on the coffee plantations, and linked to that, the children's struggle to realize their right to education. I worked for SESESMA, the Centre for Education in Health and Environment, where I am a lifelong associate now, a local voluntary organization based in San Ramon in Nicaragua. So in 2007, we were asked to get involved in planning a national conference on violence against children. And the organizers needed an expert to do a keynote speech. So we were thinking, who would we ask? Maybe get somebody from UNICEF, one of the top people from Save the Children. And thinking of my previous experience in the United Kingdom, I said, well, why shouldn't the children do the keynote speech? They're the real experts in the topic of violence against children. And so a team of child coffee workers, this team here in the picture, from Santa Marta Coffee Plantation, became the first child consultants in Nicaragua. So preparing the project, carrying out field research, peer-to-peer interviewing, drawing up their recommendations, analyzing the data, preparing their final report, rehearsing how they were going to present the report. And then came the big day of the journey to the capital city, Managua, to present the report at the conference. I had actually hired a minibus to take us all to the capital city. It would be about 3.5 hours drive, but we found the minibus couldn't get up the rocky road to the plantation where the children lived. So we had to get a 4-wheel drive pickup to go up and get the children and the parents who were coming with them, accompanying them for care and protection, and drive down to where the road was manageable, and then they could transfer from the pickup into the minibus and get to the capital city. After making their presentation, the children gave their challenge directly to the government minister for the family about what she was going to do in response. And they gave the same challenge to all the conference delegates at the end of the conference. What are you going to do? What's your commitment to children to reduce violence that we suffer? And the following year, the children retold that experience in words and pictures, and it was published in a handbook of children and young people's participation, if you'd like to follow that up further. So chapter 3, I'm just going to check my watch now to make sure I'm doing okay for time. Yes, I am. Good. Yeah. So by that time, I decided to make my life in Nicaragua and stay there. We started to develop the approach known as transformative research by children and adolescents. Because from around 2010 onwards, we stopped calling the children who were doing these investigations consultants and simply called them researchers, because we realized that they had started investigating and taking action on issues that they identified in their own communities. A consultant really is hired to work for somebody else, the in inverted commas client. So these children then became transformative researchers. So I'm just gonna, there were maybe a dozen of these child-led transformative researcher projects over the years that I was there, but I'm just going to pick on one example to show you. Children from the village of Yukul formed a research team and chose an issue affecting their families and their community that they wanted to find out more about. And the topic they chose to investigate was how alcohol is related to violence in their community. And I repeat, this is a topic they chose to investigate. Nobody suggested this to them. So they planned their research. Once they developed a questionnaire, they interviewed not just other children, but teenagers, parents, community leaders, school teachers. They even went into town. We arranged for them to travel into town to interview the chief of police. Then they analyzed all the data that they had gathered. They prepared their report and their recommendations. And that report was published in this book, first in Spanish, the original Spanish in Nicaragua in March 2012. And then we got some funding to have an English translation done. And again, that is still available. There are actually 4 reports by teams of child researchers in the book on different aspects of living without violence in rural Nicaragua. And 10 years later, finally, myself and my colleagues in SESMA, we published a step-by-step methodological guide setting out how we actually organize this process with the children. So just very quickly, the steps that are, again, we could do a whole lecture just on going through these steps, but the book is available online. So first, identification, selection of the children and young people to form a research team, then establishing the preconditions for convening the team, establishing the role of the accompanying adults, building the research team, choosing a research topic, using children's drawings, interestingly, to encourage team reflection on the topic. That was very much part of our way of working, and that even goes back to the children's consultancy in the United Kingdom in the 1990s. Designing the research, designing and developing research instruments, usually simple questionnaires that children could do peer-to-peer research, preparation for the field research, and particularly preparing the young researchers and issues of protection and safety and so on, doing the field research, managing the data and analyzing it, reaching a consensus on conclusions from the research, formulating recommendations, writing a report, drawing up an action plan, and then finally actions at various levels to disseminate the findings. Oh, sorry, finally, evaluation of the process. So all of that is set out in the guide that we just published, and that was the kind of process that the teams of child researchers followed for each one of those examples. So one more chapter, just checking. Oh, I'm doing very well for time. That's good, because I want to have time for questions, and there's already quite a lot of questions. Yeah, so develop chapter 4 from 2012 onwards, developing partnerships with children. In 2012, I returned to my native land, and I was enticed back to Ireland by the offer of a funded PhD studentship at Queen's University Belfast. In fact, my supervisor was Professor Laura Lundy, who Cynthia, I think, already mentioned, who invented the famous Lundy model for children's participation. And as an aside, my plan was to work very hard get my PhD, become a doctor of children's rights and return to Nicaragua. But I brought my Nicaraguan wife and daughter to Belfast with me. I said, we'll go to Belfast for 3 years. We'll have a great time and then we'll go back. And when I finished my PhD and was ready to go home to Nicaragua, my Nicaraguan wife and daughter absolutely refused to go back. They said, you must be joking. We're staying in Ireland. And so I'm still here 10 years later. And in fact, again, I don't really have time for gossip, but my wife, Maria, is visiting her mum in Nicaragua. And as I speak, she is selling our house in Nicaragua. We finally decided after 10 years away that we'll never be going back to live there again. So we might as well sell the house. So that's happening. That's happening as I speak. So yeah, so we're based back in Ireland now. Anyway, that's, I say, off the topic. But we came back to Belfast, and my PhD topic was to research children's perceptions of their rights at school in Nicaragua. And my methodology was to apply that same transformative research by children and adolescents approach that I've just told you about, that we developed in Nicaragua, to a PhD study. And my challenge was to make this very child-led approach work within the rigorous constraints of a PhD study, which I did, because I am now a doctor. So in 2013, I returned to Nicaragua to mobilize a new team of child researchers. So again, the whole process, starting with building a team, sharing their experience, starting off with drawings, but rather than the drawings being a subject for sort of psychological analysis, the drawings were an incentive for the children to discuss their knowledge and their experiences. We informed the parents. I didn't show you this before, but every time we did one of these projects, the parents were kept informed. They knew what was going on. They knew why their children were doing this, and they were almost invariably supported. In a few cases where at first the parents were doubtful, then we would visit them and talk to them. Not me personally, but my Nicaraguan colleagues would convince the parents why this was a valuable experience for their children to be involved in. And you know, they'd be just as well doing this as working on the farm or working in the home or whatever. Planning the field research, and then peer-to-peer interviewing in the community. And then once they gathered the information, the data analysis, creating the final report, posing for the camera at the final session. And an amazing opportunity came up. It just so happened that there was an international meeting of all the senior leadership of Save the Children for the whole of Latin America in Nicaragua at that time, and they invited the children to present to them. It was a bit of an unusual thing because the kids had just finished their research and they hadn't even presented their findings to their own communities or their own schools. So the very first presentation they got to do was to this huge, prestigious international audience, but they were very much up for it and they really appreciated that opportunity. And we got some lovely feedback from the Save the Children people. So, checking my watch again. Yeah, I'm okay. This experience inspired the development of a new analytical tool to help researchers develop partnerships with children and adolescents. So the last thing I want to do now is share this with you. So we're going to build a matrix. For some reason, my mind seems to work this way, combining two or more dimensions of variability. So for a matrix, you have horizontal and vertical. You're working in sort of 2 dimensions. So for a horizontal axis, we'll have a continuum of power and influence, from children having no power or control over a research process at one side to children running things themselves at the other side. And then for another axis, we'll do a timeline of the research process. So to create that horizontal axis, we're going to use Jerison Lansdowne's simplified typology of participation. Lansdowne suggests that really when you come right down to it, there's only 3 kinds of child participation. One of them is consultation, which is when adults ask children for their views, but children are not involved beyond that. Once children give their views, that's that they've done their thing. But then you have collaboration, which is when adults and children work together, sharing roles and responsibilities in planning and carrying out the activity. And then there's what Lansdowne calls child-led, but I like to call by the Spanish word protagonismo, or proactivism, where activities are initiated, organized, or run by children and young people themselves. And yes, adults may still be there providing support, but that's not always necessary. And for a vertical access, the phases of a research project, there are various published versions of this. I found one by Kumar that seemed to fit the bill, starting from identifying the research question and running all the way down to, well, basically, I think Kumar goes down to 8, dissemination of findings, publication, wider publicity, and so on. But for us, adding this number 9 was important because this is research with a purpose. This is research that aims at social change. So once the findings are published and disseminated, we have advocacy, mobilization, campaigning, seeking policy impact and action for social change based on what has been found in the research. So now we combine those two and we have the matrix. So we can write in descriptors in each box. You'll see along the top there, we've added a column where children are not involved because that is the reality. In much research involving children, they're not involved in many of the stages. And to complete the model, we need to add another column. It's like a third dimension of who is involved, which children are involved. So we're saying that children are involved, but we have to ask, well, which children are involved? Because if we answer that question, we're saying, well, which children have been left out and why have they been left out? So that's another column on who's involved and who's excluded at each stage in the process. So now we have the matrix. Let's see how it's used. So I'm going to apply this tool to do an analysis or an evaluation of some of the projects I've just been describing to you. So actually, this one I didn't describe to you. So this is a project that we did, which was a collaborative project, an adult-led project where we ended up collaborating with children in the analysis and dissemination phase. But this is the QUT children's study on the relationship between alcohol and violence in their community. So in this one, you can see that the children chose the research question, but I and my colleagues worked closely with the children to develop research methods and prepare questionnaires and so on. But once the children had their questionnaires, they went out into their villages. They found the peers, the people they were going to interview. They did the interviews, and then with our support, they analyzed the data and drew their own conclusions. Again, with our support, they produced their report. And we worked together on the dissemination of the report and the action plan afterwards. Now, it just so happens that in 1999 in Australia, a scoping review was carried out to look at the different approaches to participatory research with children in Australia. And this is a summary of their findings. The blue boxes are where children were consulted, the orange ones where it was collaboration, and the gray ones where it was child-led. And they used the different stages of the research process. An interesting thing is the false axis along the top there, where it jumps from 12 to 200. So if this was a diagram drawn with a real axis, it would actually look like that. So what that tells us is the children were, in the vast majority of the 211 papers, the children were only involved in providing data to the researchers. They called it participatory research, but that is just what they were doing. They were asking children for information, collecting that information, and that was that. In the vast majority of the studies reviewed, children were not involved at all outside of the data collection phase. Takes another look at the watch. We're just going to make it. So now we know from that piece of research that the norm for involving children in research, as verified by Grace and colleagues' study of 211 published papers, is this. Children are not involved at all in deciding what the research question is going to be. They're not involved at all in designing the research, preparing the research instruments, or even deciding who's going to be involved. They are involved when the adult researchers consult them to gather data. Then they're not involved in drawing the conclusions, producing a report, dissemination, or any further action. Like I say, this is not my hypothesis. This is the results of the scoping review by Rebecca Grace and her colleagues in Australia. So that is the norm for how adult researchers do what is called participatory research with children in Australia. That matrix tool is now published. It's in that book, but you can also get it at my website if you don't have access to the book. I would say please do use it as a tool when you're planning research projects involving children, and do use it also as a tool for reviewing and evaluating research projects involving children. And you can use it as a checklist to be sure that that not excluding children unnecessarily through narrow thinking. But, and here's the crucial point, I don't want it to be seen as in any way judgmental. Don't use it to make judgments about whether any particular approach is right or wrong. It doesn't do that. It just helps you to ask good questions and therefore to be able to make wise decisions about what might work well in a particular situation. And as I said, to make sure you're not excluding children just through narrow thinking. So there you are. That's my story in 4 chapters. I hope there's something in it that's useful. Thanks very much for listening. What I will do is provide to, I guess, to Marianne afterwards a PDF version, because these are all the references here. So if I provide a handout with all the references in, if you want to follow anything up, it's all there. So that's it. Thank you very much. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Harry. That was fabulous. We've all learned so much about how to move forward with our own research, and so exciting to see the work that you've been doing over a number of years, and awe-inspiring. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Cynthia and Caron, too, for sharing your perspectives and your work, such rich work with children. I'm going to have a look at the question and answers now for the last 10 minutes. Let's see how we go through the questions. So there's a few questions for Caron, and I think there's, questions for everyone. So I'll pick and choose a few as we go across. Okay, so Caron, first of all, this question is saying, I understand according to your position, research needs to be full and equal part of researchers' staff. Is that correct? Research about children need to be a full and equal part of the research team. And a little, I think there's a bit more. Please, more clearly, can you more clearly clarify? I think we're asking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We were in quite probably not a typical situation. So I think a lot of what Cynthia and Harry have spoke about are being in, with children. Our project was during COVID and during lockdown and restrictions. So we weren't able to collaborate, or we weren't able to do what we would have ordinarily done had we been in settings and, or with children. So ordinarily that would be the case, but I think, this was kind of an online situation, and some pragmatic decisions had to be made in order to still allow children to be heard about the situation they were currently in. But we couldn't work in the same way as we ordinarily work in.
Mm-hmm. And Harry?
Yeah, I can just want to add to that I think basically the answer is no, children don't have to be full and equal members of the research team. What I think researchers should do is think about the issue and make thoughtful and wise decisions about how they want to relate to children, and which children and at which stage of their research process. And sometimes you may come to the conclusion that really this is an adult responsibility and it's better if we do this. And sometimes you may say, well, the children can do that by themselves. Why do we need to do it for them? So there's no answer that yes, they must always be at this level. No, it's very variable, but you must be thinking it through and making wise decisions. And that's what sometimes people don't do. They just follow a pattern without thinking about how are we going to engage with and relate to children in this particular project.
Thank you. Great. I'm just going to go down a couple more questions for Cynthia now. Cynthia, is it the idea of research hand in hand with children, this type of citizen science, when public taking active part in scientific research? So is it part of a citizen type action, I think is the question.
That's a
Children
good question.
as citizens, or
Yeah. I'm not so sure about children as citizens. It's more about children's participation rights within the early childhood setting and how that, what that lived experience is like. So when we talk about citizenship, sometimes it can be around, you know, roles and responsibilities, that sort of definition of citizenship, and that's not really what I focused on. It was more about how they defined it for themselves and what the data sort of I guess demonstrated in terms of how those rights were being enacted by educators, but also how that worked peer-to-peer. So yeah, hopefully that kind of clarifies that question.
Thank you, Cynthia. And this
Thanks.
one perhaps to Harry. I wonder if you found any challenge to the research from adults, and how did you respond?
Very little, but I think, again, working with SESMA, working with a Nicaraguan community organization that was strongly embedded in the community and understood the community development. So anything that we were proposing, we would talk to the adults who might be affected by it. So we were working in parallel with parents. And like I showed one photo of a meeting with parents whose kids were going to be invited to, you know, be in the research team, and the parents could ask anything and we would explain everything. Also school teachers, and you know, it was easier for us to even, you know, you could send a letter to the school saying that we're doing a research session on a Wednesday morning, so such and such will miss school that day, and can you give your permission, and, you know, things like that. Community leaders, this was in a rural area where there were some village communities with established customary community leaders. So we would be talking to them and we would usually have their support. A little bit more difficult when you're working on a coffee plantation, which is being run as a business, sometimes by an absentee landlord with a, you know, a manager in place. And that's a whole another story. But there, yes, in some cases, basically, there were some coffee plantations where they didn't want us interfering. But there were others where they were kind of feudally run, where the people running the coffee plantation would have a sense of, these are my people. And although I'm here to make money by growing coffee, I also need to care about the people. And so we were saying the children are not investigating this to damage your business. They're investigating it to improve life for their community. So yes, there were coffee plantations where we simply didn't work because we weren't made welcome, but there were others where there was an understanding. And the final one, although things are changing quite quickly, Nicaragua was a very sort of masculinist sex. In Spanish, of course, they call it machismo, and there were kind of established roles for boys and girls, and often parents would feel happy enough for the boys to be out and about doing whatever, but they would be wanting the girls to stay at home and you know, help their mum prepare for their role as you know, housewife and mother in the future. So sometimes we were talking to parents about the fact that this should be equal opportunity for girls and boys, and that girls should have the same opportunity to be out and engaging in the community as boys do. And again, we usually, by taking time to hear them, you know, you don't just go into the, I mean, again, and not me doing it as I was like the only outsider European person in the whole team. So it wouldn't be me going in to tell the parents that I didn't agree with them. It would be local people talking to local people about why, first of all, understanding their concern and then talking it through with them. So yeah, the biggest obstacle really would be parents with very old-fashioned traditional views.
Thank you. Thank you. That was from Jill, who's on Children's Parliament. And also the first couple of questions were from Shamil. Thank you. And there's another one for Caron up here. Caron, could you please give some more examples or inspirations about play role acting interviews? That was so interesting. That's from Joanna.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I just did put the final slide in just to kind of, because I'd focus really on one particular project. But I have done work with children where we've used persona dolls with younger children who are kind of 5, 6, 7, and also with small world play scenarios. So I can actually put in the chat a couple of my publications. One of them is with Cathy Nutt-Brown, and one of them that I wrote around how children navigate and select their friends. which kind of gives a little bit more around these two particular methods and how they work with children, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Caron.
I'll do that now.
Here's a question also about any of the speakers, I think, from Sarah. I wanted to know, do you have experience in co-designing an intervention with children's involvement? To consider an intervention co-designed, should it be designed entirely with children, or can we offer example practices and get children's feedback and modify the intervention accordingly? So I don't know who'd like to answer that one.
I can start. Yes, you can do both. I didn't include it in this talk because it wasn't strictly, it wasn't on topic, but the project I'm currently working on at University College Dublin in Ireland, again, we're using the CRAG model, Children's Research Advisory Group. And again, this comes from Laura Lundy's work, where the idea that rather than children as researchers, which was, if you like, my model from Nicaragua, the adults are professional researchers. And so it's not like getting the children to do the research for us, which is what I did with my PhD. It's the adults that are professional researchers, but we set up an advisory group. So the children and young people become advisors to us. And that way you have this sort of co-design thing going on. We can bring any issue to them and they will advise us on how, from a children and young people's point of view, how we should do this. And our project has been this is the first time I've ever done this because it's not the model that I was using in Nicaragua. But it's the first time where I've done a project with a team, working with a team of adult researchers, but advised by a team of young advisors. And that means, yes, you can have co-design. You can take aspects to the children. Either you can give them a blank sheet and say, we need your help in developing this, or you can take something you're planning to the kids and say, tell us, will this work? Or if it won't work, how can we fix it? So you can do all of those things with a CRAG. So this has been a new experience for me. It was very tough at the start because we had to do it online. And I started this 2 years ago and it's just coming to an end now. Again, it's got its own website, www.covision.ie, if you want to know more. But yeah, it's been a learning experience because I wasn't used to working with young people online. And Caron was talking about this earlier on, about there are some benefits from working with young people online, but there's also challenges, especially for somebody like me who could be a bit set in my ways. And I'm used to working where you're all sitting around in a circle and chatting, you know. So this Zoom screen thing is a bit different, but no, we've made it work. And yeah, it's so I would say if you're interested in the idea of co-designing an intervention with children and young people, this idea of setting up an advisory group or a youth panel or whatever it is another. It's not the same as children as researchers, and don't mix them up. It's adult researchers being advised and guided by child advisors.
Thank you, Caron. Caron, another one for you. Were you concerned at all that even in just prompting ideas, parents were stealing children's voices and directing their responses? That's from Vicky.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? And I think that's probably, there was probably 1 or 2 instances where we thought there was, you know, the kind of balance had tipped really, and that perhaps a parent was saying more and, you know, we weren't hearing as much from the child. And I think that's why we said that, you know, if we were to go down this line again, we'd have some guidance for parents. But the instances where we felt like the parents were enabling, whether there was the odd word or the odd prompt, we actually felt that was actually setting children at ease. And, you know, sometimes when children start to talk and if it's somebody they don't know or they're feeling a bit nervous, sometimes they don't know what to say. And children did talk to us about the Zoom scenario. Sometimes you don't know what to say online, and it's different to what they called it, different to being in the real world. You know, in the real world, when even if it was with a friend that they were talking to that they'd known before COVID, they said, when I'm with my friends, I know what to say when I'm with them in person. But when I'm on Zoom, sometimes I don't know what to say. And then I might even say something that, you know, I wouldn't ordinarily say, you know. So although it was just the odd word or prompt or phrase, we did feel it was more enabling and it helped children to sort of set them at ease and kind of get going. It was almost a bit like a scaffolding or a facilitation. And we didn't want children to feel uncomfortable. So I suppose you could say, well, there's an element, the parents' voice is in there, but I think in those instances, we felt it was better really to sort of help them get going, and we didn't feel that they were kind of putting words in their mouths or anything like that. It was just kind of to help them start off on their road.
Thanks, Caron. I think this one's for Harry. David's question is, how are the meta skills of Western paradigms of research, assuming they're not, if they're not assumed knowledge, taught by the adult team and learned by the children researchers in your work?
Well, that's a deep question, but the first thing to point out is that the culture of Nicaragua is certainly not Eastern. It's a very interesting mix. Of course, Nicaragua still has a strong element of indigenous Central American culture, but it was conquered by the Spanish hundreds of years ago. So it has an imposed European culture laid over the indigenous culture, European Roman Catholic kind of culture. Then the British took over and brought African people to Nicaragua and made them work as slaves. And so there's elements of African culture intermingling with the indigenous culture and the imposed European culture. And then, of course, Nicaragua had a communist revolution in 1980. And so there is still a very strong, in fact, the same party, the Frente Sandinista, is back running the country again. So there's a strong element of modern Marxist-Leninism, revolutionary communism embedded now, built into Nicaraguan culture. So it's a very strange mix, but you're not dealing with any kind of traditional, Eastern culture in Nicaragua. You're dealing with something very unique. So basically, our way of talking about research with children is, my definition of research is it's something that leads to creation of new knowledge, knowing something that was not known before. If we're just repeating knowledge that's already known, we're not doing research. We're just doing kind of journalism or whatever. So research means you're creating something new. You're knowing something that you didn't know before. And all the different methods of research, in the end, what they're doing is trying to come up with some new knowledge that can then be shared. So we're talking to the children about what are the problems in your community? What are the issues facing you in your lives that we could do something about if we knew more about them? If we understood more what's going on here, like say the alcohol thing, the children felt that there was a problem in their community because alcohol seemed to be causing violence and domestic violence and community violence and so on. And so we're saying, if we understood better what's going on here, how people see this, then we'd be able to suggest something. And so you're saying research creates knowledge. If that knowledge is relevant to the issues in your life, then we can use it to push for changes. So that was how we explained it to the kids.
Thank you, Harry. And another one that's a little bit related, we've only got time for probably one or two more quick questions. How do you go about designing ethics when you're usually requiring the research question and design beforehand to get approval? Maybe it's not quite so difficult in some places, but
well, again, I'll quickly start on that and let others have a chance. But this was in CESESMA, we weren't working under the auspices of any university, so we weren't tied to an institutional ethical procedure, and that meant we had to do it ourselves. So we designed bottom up a code of child protection and safeguarding code. And this was, again, another participatory process. Rather than just copying one from somewhere, we started discussion groups with children, with teachers, with parents about what were the risks, about what would help to reduce the risks, and then putting that together as a code of practice. So in the work I was showing with CESESMA, we developed our ethics in that way. When I came to do my PhD, I found myself for the first time confronting a university ethics procedure. So yes, that was about dialoguing with the ethics committee about what I was planning to do and how I could guarantee that this was in fact ethical and safe. And slightly different from most of the work in Nicaragua. When I got my PhD studentship, the broad research topic had been set. But the children themselves, and I decided that I wanted to do it in this way. So I had to put that into a proposal and get ethical approval for it.
Thank you. Any other?
Other people probably have different experiences from mine. My experiences were not pretty typical.
Cynthia,
I would just say, when I try to put things together, I've kind of try to have very broad kind of questions. And then if things change, we're able to put in amendments to ethics and kind of get there, you know, see if we can make, you know, if we can have it, if there's anything that comes up, but try to keep it as broad as possible in those instances, and to actually articulate that, you know, this is a collaborative project and how that's going to work, but we can make amendments if things come along.
We have one last question that's I'm interested in the answer as well. So Julia, a question for Harry, if time permits. Have you kept in contact with the children from your earlier work and have any pursued a career in research and advocacy?
Well, yes, and in research, no, but in advocacy of various kinds, yes. And here another reference. When COVID came, it wasn't really possible to continue doing that kind of work in the communities in Nicaragua. So by that time I was back in Ireland, but my colleagues in Nicaragua spoke to the funders and got permission to do a retrospective review, what we call in Spanish sistematización, but it's kind of a retrospective review of the whole previous 10 years of research with and by children. And so we contacted some of the young people, some now young adults who had been the children, and in some of the photos, I mean, I could show you now photos of then and now, you know. So we did actually, we are still in contact with some of those young people, and also now, even in COVID times, the Sesma team were able to travel to the coffee plantation on a motorbike with a mobile phone and get a connection. And so we were able to involve them in Zoom meetings via satellite, which was just blew my mind. So we did this sistematización, a looking back overview of the whole 10 years, and it is going to be published early next year. It's in the new handbook of children and young people's participation. I think I showed you the old one from 10 years ago. The new one is at the printers, I believe. So you'll be able to read that review, and that actually involves some of those now young adults. So none of them I know that as far as I know, are working in universities as researchers. Some have stayed in the communities and are now young adult leaders. They're people regarded as leaders of their own communities. Some have gone into education. A couple have done teacher training and become primary school teachers, who again are important leaders in their own village communities. Others have gone some have gone into politics. You know, we could spend a whole day talking about Nicaraguan politics, but some have taken up positions in the Frente Sandinista, are involved in running the country, and one I know of became an evangelist preacher. So they're exercising their leadership in and other one went into community folk dance and runs a folk dance school. So yeah, they're exercising leadership, following their own paths. But I don't know anybody's actually gone into research as a university researcher.
Thank you so much.
But yes, we are still in touch. It's wonderful. That's one wonderful thing about working in small rural communities. It's just a different vibe.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I need to close the session now. It's been an absolute delight to hear from Caron, Cynthia and Harry, and we really appreciate everyone's time tonight and this morning, if wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much to Kathy as well, for Kathy Nielsen, who is the centre manager, who's organised the session and made sure it ran smoothly, and for everyone's questions and contributions, and really appreciate the speakers tonight's time. So thank you so much, and we hope to continue this discussion another time. And it's time to close the session. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. It's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Caron.
much.
Thanks, Caron.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.